At a wedding, the son called the convict's mother a bum, and as soon as she took the microphone, the matchmakers were stunned. Part 1. A Mother's Pride. Marina looked with a smile at her son trying on a new suit. Tall, statuesque, dark-haired, he filled the small room with a presence that both awed and comforted her. Ilya, her Ilya. Tomorrow he would get married to Sophia, a lovely girl, undeniably beautiful, with eyes that sparkled with ambition and a family steeped in old money. A perfect match according to everyone, except maybe Marina. She suppressed a sigh. She knew her misgivings were born of a mother's possessiveness, a selfish desire to remain the center of her son's world. But she also couldn't shake the feeling that Sophia, with her polished facade and carefully curated social circle, didn't quite appreciate the strength and resilience that lay beneath Ilya's charm. Sophia saw the lawyer, the successful businessman, the eligible bachelor. Marina saw the boy who had scraped his knees falling from trees, the teenager who had stayed up all night studying for exams, the young man who had held her hand through the darkest days of her life. The past. It always came back to the past, a past she had tried so desperately to bury for Ilya's sake. "Doesn't it look great, Mom?" Ilya finally pulled himself away from the mirror, striking a playful pose. "Think Sophia will approve?" Marina forced a bright smile. "You look magnificent, son. She'll be captivated." He grinned, his dark eyes crinkling at the corners. "You always know what to say." "Thanks, Mom." He moved towards her and wrapped her in a hug. "I really appreciate you helping me with all this, even if you don't exactly see eye to eye with Sophia's family." Marina stiffened slightly in his embrace. The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Sophia's family, the renowned Ivanovs. Wealthy, influential, and acutely aware of social standing. They had made it abundantly clear, through veiled comments and subtle snubs, that Marina's presence at the wedding would be inconvenient. "At the wedding?" Ilya finally pulled himself away from the mirror. "Mom, are you going to the wedding? Are you going to the wedding? We agreed you wouldn't be there." His tone was light, almost joking, but Marina could detect a thread of anxiety woven beneath the surface. He was walking a tightrope, balancing his love for her with his desire to please Sophia and her powerful family. "Agreed?" "Son, I thought you were joking," Marina said, trying to keep her voice steady. The casual dismissal stung more than she cared to admit. Had she really become so invisible? "Mom, come on, we talked about this. It's complicated. Sophia's grandmother, she's sensitive. You know how these things are. It's just for appearances." He avoided her gaze, fiddling with the cuff of his shirt. Marina felt a familiar wave of shame wash over her. The shame she had tried so hard to keep hidden from Ilya. The shame that clung to her like a second skin. She knew what he meant by complicated and sensitive. He meant that her presence, her mere existence, threatened the carefully constructed image of respectability that the Ivanovs had cultivated for generations. He meant that her past, a past she had paid for dearly, was a stain they couldn't tolerate. "Once again, do not go to the ceremony. You will not be welcome there," Ilya continued, his voice now laced with pleading. "Please, Mom, just this one day. For me. I'll make it up to you, I promise." The irony was almost unbearable. He was asking her to sacrifice her own happiness, her own pride for him. Again, just as she had done countless times before. But this time it felt different. This time it felt like he was asking her to erase a part of herself, to deny the very experiences that had shaped her into the woman she was. "Ilya," she said softly, reaching out to touch his cheek. "I understand. I always do. But it's hard. It's really hard." He closed his eyes for a moment, then took her hand and squeezed it tightly. "I know, Mom. I know. But please trust me. Just this once." She nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "I trust you, son. Always." But as she watched him preen in front of the mirror again, the weight of the unsaid words, the unspoken truths, pressed down on her with suffocating force. Part 2. Sleepless Nights and Unforeseen Encounters. It was starting to get light outside the window. Did Marina sit up all night working on the album? Yes, it was a photo album filled with pictures of Ilya from birth to the present day. Pictures of him laughing, playing, studying, graduating. Pictures that told the story of a life she had poured all her love and energy into. Pictures that showcased the son she was so incredibly proud of. She flipped through the pages, pausing at a photo of Ilya as a child, dressed in a superhero costume, his eyes shining with unadulterated joy. A pang of guilt shot through her. Had she failed him? Had she sheltered him too much, shielded him from the realities of her past? Had she made him ashamed of her? She went to bed eventually, but sleep was elusive. Her mind raced, replaying the conversation with Ilya, picking at the raw edges of her insecurity and resentment. The images flickered behind her eyelids. Sophia's cool, appraising gaze. The Ivanov's thinly veiled disdain. Ilya's desperate plea. She tossed and turned, finally giving up and getting out of bed. She wandered through the apartment, the silence amplifying the ache in her heart. She stopped in front of the large window, gazing out at the city waking up. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, a promise of a new day. A day that would be filled with joy and celebration for everyone but her. As she stared at the sunrise, a sudden resolve hardened within her. She couldn't stay here, locked away in her apartment, feeling sorry for herself. She needed to do something, anything, to reclaim her own sense of worth. She needed to prove to herself, and perhaps even to Ilya, that she was more than just a shameful secret. She showered, dressed, and applied a touch of makeup. She chose a simple but elegant dress, one that made her feel confident and strong. Then she grabbed her purse and headed out. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay home. She ended up at a small cafe she frequented, a place where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the murmur of conversations filled her with a sense of calm. She ordered a cappuccino and sat at a table near the window, watching the world go by. She was lost in thought when she felt a tap on her shoulder. She looked up to see a man standing beside her, a man with kind eyes and a warm smile. She knew this face. Marina, isn't it? From Ilya's school? I'm Victor. Victor, Ilya's classmate's father. They had been friends for many years. Victor, what a pleasant surprise, Marina said, a genuine smile gracing her lips. Please, sit down. Victor pulled up a chair and sat opposite her. They exchanged pleasantries, catching up on each other's lives. Victor was a successful businessman, a widower, and a genuinely good person. Marina had always admired his strength and his unwavering optimism. As they talked, Marina found herself confiding in Victor about her situation with Ilya and the wedding. She hesitated at first, ashamed to reveal her vulnerabilities, but Victor listened with unwavering attention, his eyes filled with empathy. Marina, he said gently when she had finished, you are a remarkable woman. Ilya is lucky to have you as his mother. Don't let anyone, especially not Sophia's family, make you feel otherwise. His words were like a balm to her wounded soul. She looked at him, gratitude welling up inside her. Thank you, Victor, she said, her voice thick with emotion. That means a lot to me. They continued to talk, their conversation flowing easily between personal stories and philosophical musings. As they spoke, Marina felt a connection forming between them, a sense of understanding and shared experience that she hadn't felt in a long time. After a couple of hours, Victor excused himself to take a phone call. Marina sat back, sipping her cappuccino, feeling a renewed sense of hope. Perhaps she thought things weren't as bleak as they seemed. Then the guy noticed that Mom was walking towards the exit with some rich guy. Ilya, who was supposed to be finalizing arrangements at the wedding venue, spotted his mother through the cafe window. He watched her, his brow furrowed in confusion, as she laughed and chatted with a man he vaguely recognized. A wave of anger washed over him, anger at his mother for defying his wishes, anger at Victor for intruding on their lives, and anger at himself for being caught in the middle. He stormed out of the venue and hurried toward the cafe. He reached the door just as Marina and Victor were saying goodbye. Ilya caught up with her on the porch. His voice, tight with barely suppressed fury, cut through the morning air. Mom, where are you going? Marina turned, startled by his sudden appearance. Her eyes widened as she took in his flushed face and clenched fists. Ilya, she said softly, reaching out to touch his arm, What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at the venue? That's not the point, Mom, he snapped, pulling away from her touch. What are you doing here? With him. He gestured dismissively towards Victor, his eyes blazing with resentment. Are you trying to embarrass me? To ruin everything? Marina recoiled, stung by his harsh words. Ilya, please, she pleaded, her voice trembling. Don't do this. Not here. Why not? He challenged, his voice rising. Is it because you don't want your fancy new friends to see what you really are? A convict's mother? A bum? The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Marina gasped, her face draining of color. Victor stepped forward, his face hardening with anger. Ilya, he said sternly, that's enough. You have no right to speak to your mother like that. Ilya ignored him, his focus solely on Marina. You promised, Mom, he said, his voice dripping with accusation. You promised you wouldn't ruin this for me. Marina looked at him, her eyes filled with pain and disappointment. The son she had loved and protected, the son she had sacrificed everything for, was now standing before her, spewing venomous words fueled by shame and social climbing. I think the three of us are going to have a very long and difficult conversation, Victor said, his voice low and dangerous. He turned to Marina, his eyes filled with concern. Are you all right, Marina? Marina nodded slowly, trying to regain her composure. She took a deep breath and looked at Ilya, her face set with a newfound determination. Yes, she said, her voice clear and steady. Yes, we are. But not here. We're going to the wedding. Ilya stared at her, stunned. What? You can't be serious. I've been invited, she said, reaching into her purse and pulling out a small, ornate card. Sophia invited me herself, just this morning. She held up the invitation, her eyes sparkling with defiance, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. Part 3. The Wedding and the Revelation. The wedding was everything Sophia and her family had envisioned. Opulent, extravagant, and meticulously planned. The venue, a sprawling estate overlooking the city, was decorated with cascading flowers, shimmering lights, and crystal chandeliers. Guests dressed in their finest attire milled about, sipping champagne and engaging in polite conversation. Marina, accompanied by Victor, arrived just as the ceremony was about to begin. Ilya spotted them from across the lawn, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. He rushed towards them, his movements frantic. Mom, what are you doing here? He hissed, grabbing her arm. I told you not to come. Ilya, Marina said calmly, shaking off his grip. I have a right to be here. I'm your mother. But Sophia invited me, Marina explained, showing Ilya invitation. She wants me in there. He glanced at the invitation in disbelief. This doesn't change anything, he said, his voice tight with frustration. You're still going to embarrass me in front of everyone. I have no intention of embarrassing you, Ilya, Marina said, her voice firm. I'm here to celebrate your happiness. But I'm also here to be myself. I'm not going to hide anymore. Victor placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. She's right, Ilya, he said. Your mother is a remarkable woman. You should be proud of her. Ilya glared at Victor, then back at Marina, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. He knew he was losing control of the situation, and he didn't know how to stop it. The ceremony began, and Marina and Victor took their seats near the back of the crowd. Ilya stood at the altar, looking pale and drawn. Sophia, radiant in her white gown, smiled serenely, oblivious to the tension brewing beneath the surface. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with heartfelt vows and touching moments. But Marina couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Ilya looked miserable, and Sophia's smile seemed forced. As the ceremony concluded and the guests began to move toward the reception, Sophia approached Marina, her smile brittle. Marina, she said, her voice strained. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. You're welcome, Sophia, Marina replied, her eyes searching Sophia's face. I hope you're happy. Sophia hesitated for a moment, then let out a sigh. I don't know, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can do this. Before Marina could respond, the music started, signaling the beginning of the reception. The guests began to mingle, their laughter and chatter filling the air. The first dance was awkward, Ilya and Sophia moving together with a stiltedness that belied their supposed love. As they danced, Ilya's gaze kept drifting towards Marina, his eyes filled with a silent plea. After the first dance, the speeches began. Sophia's father, a powerful and imposing man, gave a long and self-aggrandizing speech about his daughter's accomplishments and the Ivanovs' illustrious history. The best man followed with a series of embarrassing anecdotes about Ilya's bachelor days. Then it was Ilya's turn. He stood up, his face pale, and walked towards the microphone. He cleared his throat and looked out at the crowd. I don't really know what to say, he began, his voice trembling. I'm incredibly grateful to everyone who's here today to celebrate with us. Sophia, you look beautiful. I love you. But his words rang hollow. He didn't sound like a man in love. He sounded like a man trapped. He paused, his eyes darting towards Marina. Then he took a deep breath and continued. But there's something I need to say. Something I should have said a long time ago. He looked at Sophia, his face filled with regret. Sophia, he said, his voice now clear and strong. I can't do this. I can't marry you. Not like this. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Sophia stared at him, her face contorted with shock and disbelief. What? She whispered, her voice barely audible. What are you saying? I'm saying that I'm not happy, Ilya said, his voice filled with emotion. I'm saying that I've been trying to be someone I'm not. Someone that your family wants me to be. But I can't do it anymore. I need to be true to myself. He turned to Marina, his eyes filled with love and remorse. And I need to be true to my mother. The woman who has loved me unconditionally, who has sacrificed everything for me, who has taught me everything I know about love and compassion. He walked towards Marina, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. He knelt down before her and took her hands in his. Mom, he said, his voice choked with emotion. I'm so sorry. I've been so ashamed of you, so afraid of what people would think. But you're the strongest, most amazing woman I know. I love you more than words can say. Marina's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and cupped his face in her hands. I love you too, son, she said, her voice trembling. I always have, and I always will. Then she stood up and walked toward the microphone. The crowd parted before her, their faces etched with curiosity and anticipation. She took a deep breath and looked out at the stunned faces before her. My name is Marina, she said, her voice clear and strong. And yes, it's true. I was convicted of a crime I committed to protect my son. I served my time, and I paid my debt to society. But that doesn't define who I am. I am a mother, a friend, a survivor, and I am proud of who I am. She paused, her eyes sweeping across the room. I raised Ilya alone, worked night and day to give him everything I didn't have. He studied at night to get where he is now. She continued, her voice ringing with passion and conviction. She told the story of her life, the struggles she had faced, the sacrifices she had made, the love she had for her son. She spoke of her hopes and dreams, her fears and insecurities. She spoke of the importance of forgiveness, acceptance, and unconditional love. As she spoke, the atmosphere in the room began to change. The initial shock and judgment gave way to understanding and empathy. Tears streamed down the faces of many of the guests, their hearts touched by her honesty and vulnerability. And as soon as she took the microphone, the matchmakers were stunned. Their carefully constructed world of social status and calculated alliances crumbled before their eyes. They had underestimated Marina, dismissing her as a liability, a stain on their perfect image. But they had failed to recognize the true strength and resilience that lay within her. When Marina finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, their faces filled with admiration and respect. Sophia, her eyes red and swollen, approached Marina and embraced her tightly. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for being so brave. Ilya stood beside them, his arm around Marina, his eyes shining with pride. He had finally found the courage to be true to himself, to embrace his past, and to celebrate the woman who had made him the man he was. The wedding was over, but a new beginning had begun, a beginning filled with honesty, acceptance, and unconditional love. And as Marina looked at her son, her heart swelled with joy. She had always known that he was destined for greatness, but she had never imagined that his greatest triumph would be his courage to be true to himself and to love her without shame for who she truly was.